I figure a good way to start this week's episode is just a mental image. Everyone likes a mental image, right?
Maybe.
I just like to say that I am just barely not wearing spandex right now.
That could go a lot of ways, and I'm uncomfortable already.
It's like saying like a double negative sort of thing. You know, it's hard to process, but I just got back from bike ride. I mean, I walked in the door like 20 minutes ago. But yeah, so I got those endorphins flowing right now, which is good.
Yep.
But I know that you're back from your Acadia trip. I'm back from my Zion trip. I know I have some stories about Zion and a big change in my process that I've begun.
Okay.
And I would like to hear about your trip to Acadia, hear how that went and everything else, job situation. So where shall we start?
I'll just say about Acadia quick. Because there's not much to it.
Well, it's probably good because it probably means there's no like bears eating things or whatever, you know?
No, though I was told that surprisingly enough, there were 3 black bear sightings on the island this summer.
Is that not common?
No, it's not because because you're technically on an island. When you're in Acadia, it's on Mount Desert Island.
Mm-hmm.
Animals really don't come over that way. Like you'll get some deer and some herbivores and that kind of thing, prey animals. But to see like a black bear or any of that, moose even, it's very rare because there's not much there for them to munch on, to eat.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah. So I was told that, but no, I mean, nothing that ate my bag or went after my camera or anything. So that was good. It's a very good thing. But I don't know. The trip overall was very good creatively. I think I came away with a couple of pretty solid images, finding a sort of focus for the trip for that area that I hadn't really delved into much prior, which was nice. But mentally, it was not the best at all. I struggled really, really hard on, when was that? Tuesday. So not the day that I arrived, but the first full day that I had there, was just, it was rough. And to the point where...
Why do you think that was? Because I mean, you're talking about how, you know, you're starting this new job and then you're kind of going away from that and seeing this potentially as this little bit of an escape or a retreat. So it sounds like that's probably not quite what you're anticipating, at least for that, you know, first day or so.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, I was thinking of this trip as as per usual, when I go on trips, I always think I'm going to get done so much more than I actually do. And it never ends up happening, which I've learned to kind of accept to a degree. But with this one, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to be up here alone. So I'll bring my book up and I'll go out, I'll explore in the mornings. I may come back to camp for a little bit for like a lunch or something, a snack, and read or do some writing. I had some articles that I needed to work on. And then I'll go back out for the evening and then come back and go to bed kind of deal. None of that ended up happening. The first full day that I was there, I was just so in my head, and just when I get deeply depressed, I lose any sense of appetite and any desire to care for my body and care for myself. So I didn't eat anything throughout the day until I got back to camp and realized that I didn't eat anything through the day.
Yeah.
And
that seems like a cycle that'll just kind of feed on itself.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of literally in a way.
Yeah. And it was one of those things too, where I would go out, and the only time that during this week that I wasn't in my head was when I was creating. But I would get so steeped into creating that I'd forget that I wasn't eating or taking care of myself. And it was just this vicious cycle of creating really helps me to get away from everything. But it's also hurting me in that sense. I did start to like loosely recover towards the end of the trip. But Tuesday.
And how long was the trip?
I was supposed to be there until Saturday. I would have left Saturday early morning. I ended up leaving Friday around 2 a.m. Instead. So a day early.
How many days total was that?
Tuesday through Friday. So 4 full days.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, about 4 days or so is about how long it takes me to kind of start getting in the rhythm of things.
Yeah. I definitely felt that too.
Yeah.
I felt that towards the end of the trip, I was feeling better about everything. But at that point, I was also still like taking better care of myself, but not sufficiently enough. Not to mention, I was right at the end of season, so I couldn't stay any longer, even if I wanted to, or if the job would have allowed me to.
Yeah. And
it was cold. I mean, that didn't, like, there were a lot of like environmental factors that weren't helping everything. I mean, you had the fact that by 5:30 it was getting dark.
Yeah.
So that, the cold temperatures, being alone, all of that was kind of exacerbating what will eventually happen of being my seasonal affective disorder kicking in.
Yeah.
And just worsening.
Was the sun out much out there, or was it cloudy, or what kind of weather do you have?
It was pretty sunny. Yeah, it was pretty.
Well,
weather during the day was great. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Just means really cold at night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, like I said, it was mentally exhausting, but creatively fulfilling. I'm still working on cutting down the images that I want to keep from this trip. I played around a lot with the kelp, with the seaweed that was on the rocks. I saw a starfish for the first time. That was pretty awesome.
Nice.
That was actually on Tuesday, the first day that I saw that. I was walking around the beach, and this girl with her family, as I was photographing the kelp, this girl with her family pointed out the starfish, and then all of a sudden she was pointing them out like all over the place. I think she saw like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Which was pretty awesome. All of that aside, I met up with Brenda Petrella, who was actually in the same campground as me. We coincided that a little bit. If I was in a better mental state, I probably would have hung out with her more and gone out shooting with her more, and that probably would have helped a little bit, but regardless, we met up on Wednesday midday and went over to one of the places where we're thinking about hosting our creative retreat. It's essentially a glamping resort, and I think I don't know if I mentioned it before.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but it does, like, they have like heated pool and hot tub outside. They have
That'd be nice.
A full restaurant. They do catering and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Fire pits with free wood and or complimentary wood, technically. So that seems like a great place for us to do everything. I just have to figure out the financial side of doing that and what it's going to cost us per person, and break all of that down, figure out logistics on that. But yeah, I mean, that was pretty much Acadia. There's like, I'm sure there's more that we could really like delve into. I mean, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, I still enjoyed, in hindsight, I enjoyed it, but during, not so much. And it's very similar in that sense to how Colorado was for me as well last year. Which,
I mean, that really speaks of the strong connection between the mind and the body. And I mean, I know, there'll be times when, I'm going for a bit of a longer hike, and maybe I haven't eaten as much as I should have. And then you start having this feeling of like, what is this? Why do I just not feel great or whatever? And then it's so easy for those physical feelings from the body, where the body's telling you need something, but for you to just, your mind to take that and just start taking off in terms of like, what am I doing here? Everything else along those lines. That's one thing I've really tried to pay more attention to try to make sure that I give my body what it needs, because it's so easy to not realize how much physical effort goes into some of the trips, even if you're just walking around during the day. And then it could very easily start a bit of a spiral. And I think that in some ways is a little bit part of the first day funk that I'll get on the trip. a few episodes back, I had mentioned about how I got this new Garmin watch, and this trip that I just went on, in your experience, reminded me of this. This is the first trip I've gone on with that watch, and I could see what the impact was from the early morning drive and that long drive, combined with not really having great food other than just like some snacks and stuff. By the time I got to Zion, I mean, it was like midday or so. I was kind of feeling okay. I was feeling a little bit tired. I looked at my watch, which has this whole body battery thing, which we had mentioned in the past, and it was really low. And so to see that number and then to realize how horrible that early morning drive plus the lack of having, a lot of good food that day, like it's so easy to not really completely listen to what, my body is saying, and just to kind of keep pushing it. So I actually started paying attention more to what the watch was saying, and I was able to see an illustration via that watch of what usually causes that first day funk, which is just a whole variety of things. So when I saw that was telling me, hey, this is, you're kind of stressed out, you're drained. I paid attention to that, and that really actually did help on this trip. I didn't have a first day funk at all, but there was another factor at play as well, which is I was highly distracted leading up to the trip, where I purchased a camping shower, which it uses propane to heat it. So you have like instantaneous heat, and then you have this enclosure that hooks to the roof rack of your car that, you pop open, and then you have like this, the shower stall basically. And in the days leading up to the trip, I had to replace the crossbars on my roof rack and get the hardware to mount it on. And I was doing all that sort of stuff, so much so that I kind of forgot to worry about the photography side of things. And then when I actually went into the trip, and there was this big storm that went through, and the conditions were not great for photography for the first 4 days. But I had zero first day funk. I think partially because I was distracted by having to get the camp shower going, which by the way was amazing to have. Just at the end of the day, just have like a hot shower. Oh, it was so good. But between that and paying attention to what my body was telling me and trying to give it all the nutrition that it needed, it basically did away with the first day funk, which was good. But just what you're talking about forgetting to eat at a certain point because of whatever else, and kind of getting into this spiral. I've definitely experienced stuff like that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, just you're talking about the car ride itself and how exhausting that is. That's something that I hadn't taken into account because
you had a really early start as well. Yeah,
very early start on top of just generally poor drive. I mean, the conditions would have been great for photography in Maine. Yeah, because it was overcast. It was a little bit of fog, like overall dreary conditions, which I love, especially in the forest. But for driving, not so much, because I left the house around 2:30. On the way to the main roads, I almost hit 4 different deer, which is fantastic. Geez. 2 of which, 2 ran out in front of me, and then 2 were just around corners, just standing in the lane of the road, staring at me like, why are you up? What are you doing? You shouldn't be out here. And then it was, the sun didn't start the environment didn't start brightening up until almost 7 o'clock. So it was 4.5 hours of darkness. Yeah. And even so, it was not it wasn't like it was sunny or bright skies or anything to really wake you up. It was still like the kind of weather you just want to curl back in bed and go back to sleep. So with all of that taken into account, that definitely could be some form of explanation for how I felt the next day. Just that it caught up to me.
It's got to be something that factors in, at least to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also you consider that, like when I go on the rides, I mean, it's a freeway through the desert. I don't have to worry about deer. And there's not a lot of people on the road. It's usually just like truckers at that time of morning, and they're good drivers. So you don't have like the idiot drivers and such. But yeah, if I was constantly like on edge, waiting for the next deer around every corner, yeah, that would also probably get I don't know whether it's just the adrenaline going or whatever it is, just so your body stays in this heightened state of awareness. And at some point, it's going to cause things to crash a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, especially like going back and forth between adrenaline boosting up and then crashing back down, and having that so early in the morning too, on top of being tired. I mean, that wreaks havoc on your system.
There's another factor too, when you're talking about your experience there. And I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I know that when I'm in the field, I have this constant feeling that I need to be doing something. Yeah. And that if I'm not doing something, why am I there?
I have that feeling all the time though.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely something that I whether it's the whole like social media stuff, or you feel like, if you're not constantly doing something, that you're kind of fading into obscurity or whatever it is. But I oftentimes have to tell myself to just like quiet down. I don't need that voice telling me I constantly have to do something. It's like the if you're going to the gym a lot, if you're, doing workouts, it's the off days where you have the growth that happens. Mm-hmm. But it's so hard to get out of that mindset when you're in the field. And so do you think that also was something that was perhaps contributing a little bit to the at least the experience in the first little bit of the trip?
Maybe a little bit. The nice thing about Acadia is that I've been up there twice before now, so I kind of know what sections of the park I want to visit. During this trip, I didn't really feel rushed to go visit anywhere. I didn't
That's good.
feel rushed while I was like the one afternoon I spent maybe 2 or 3 hours photographing the kelp and stuff. I didn't feel rushed by the expectations of anyone else nor myself. So I'm sure it played a part, because I did want to keep going. I did want to be out. I didn't want to just be sat back at the campground or anywhere else without there being some kind of activity to do, like photography or something different to see, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had mentioned that maybe you're going to do some writing on the trip. Did you do any of that at all?
Not on the trip, no.
Okay.
No, I was hoping to get 2 articles at least drafted while I was up there, and I didn't get anything done.
Which doesn't surprise me, because there's a lot of distractions.
Yeah,
in a good way.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
I guess it just, my problem is that I didn't make it a priority, and I rarely do when I'm out there. Especially on a trip like this, I very easily could have made it a priority. Sit down at the beach and just write instead of explore and photograph. But it was also one of those things that photography has been my way of escaping my mind and my inner thoughts for the past decade, if not a little bit longer now. So it was just more of an instinctual reaction of grab the camera and get out of your head, because that's what works, instead of writing, where you're trying to collect the thoughts in your head that are useful and throw them on a page. So that may have been at least a part of why I didn't do much writing. And I don't know how productive or worthwhile any of it would have ended up being anyway. So,
do you find that you get as lost in the process of photography with digital than when you were working with a large format?
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, this past week, I've kind of been thinking more and more about large format, kind of like, you think about your ex-girlfriend from forever ago and, the times we had. Most of that has to do with like the lack of movements, not having movement, front tilt, and etc. for digital. And I'm still trying to figure out with using the tilt shift adapter, on the digital kit. That's something that's weird to me because with the Chamonix and even with the Intrepid, I'm very used to front axis tilt.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems I've been talking to Joel Truckenbrod, who some of our listeners may know, and if not, you will certainly hear more from him and of him as he starts to ramp up work, and I'll be pushing his work a bit.
He's a great photographer.
Fantastic. Yeah. Great guy too. I was talking with him, and he uses a tilt shift lens with his 35 millimeter digital cameras. And he was saying that most of them act more like base tilt than axis.
Which is a bit awkward, more awkward for focusing and all that.
Right, because I was playing around with it a very little bit with some of the rocks and kelp in Acadia, and I was like, I went to tilt the lens down thinking, okay, now everything, I've focused near, tilt far, and I tilt the lens down and the entire composition moves down.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, what? Like, there's something wrong here. Like, this should not be happening. And even like, I was playing around with it very little bit, but that threw me for a loop, and I just was not in the mindset to play around with it too much. I just couldn't get into that more technical understanding of it to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be playing more with it this weekend when I go up to the cabin for the weekend. Just try and figure it out. But yeah, apparently you have to tilt and recompose, and it's a big pain in the ass kind of thing. But once you get it, it tends to be a little bit easier, maybe.
You figure a lot of it will come down to some degree of muscle memory, but it will probably make it a bit more of that, slow you down, process oriented approach. But, just one more hurdle in the process that in the end will give you a better image, but it'll make you work a little bit more for it. So maybe not such a bad thing once you get it all figured out. On the topic of my my trip up to Zion, I was there for 10 days, which is about the usual time that I go to Zion in the fall. And I exposed 34 sheets of Provia. See, we're recording this on a Friday. I got back on Sunday, dropped my film off on Monday, and then picked it up on, I guess, Wednesday. So I've been going through and scanning them. I haven't scanned them all yet, but of the first 7 sheets of film I've scanned, I have 5 portfolio shots. And I'm thinking that I probably have maybe 8 or so, which is a lot. And so I figure I've been thinking about my process. I've been thinking about how to streamline it, how to make it where it's less stressful for me. I mean, I can't say I have a stressful job, but the fact that I have so much work that I have to do following my fall trip, and then not long after that, it's time to jump out in the field on the Death Valley trip. That part just doesn't. It'd be nice if I can change that around. And I've talked in the past with you about how I wouldn't mind changing my process so that I can get a lot of the work done during the summer. And I figure what really makes the most sense is for me to start the year in the fall. So when it comes to the zine, when it comes to the print portfolio, fall is where it starts. And then, because that's the easiest trip. That's the one where I can produce a lot of work. And then the Death Valley trip, Death Valley is a more frustrating location. I can produce a decent amount of work from there, but I have to work really hard for it. And in the past, when I've started the year I started the portfolio and the zine with the Death Valley work, it puts a lot of pressure on me because it's like as soon as the year ticks from 2024 to 2025 and I have no work under my belt for everything for that year, and then I'm starting in Death Valley, and then it's like, so I think that leads to the first day funk and everything else associated with it,
which in reality is just mental gymnastics that you're playing on yourself anyway. But
totally, it totally is. And then also the spring trip. The spring trip is the one that produces the least amount of work, and it's the most effort. And the timing on that one is tricky. So I figured I should start things in the fall. So I start the year with a good body of work from the fall. Then I can add to it the work from Death Valley. So I can go into the Death Valley trip not feeling like I have that level of pressure where, I get what I get. It's fine. And then the spring trip, if I walk away from the spring trip with no photos, I'm fine. I'm already sitting on a pile of work from the fall and from also Death Valley. And then that way I can do all the work on the print portfolios and the zine. I put it up for pre-order at the normal time in mid-August. I'd ship them during the month of September. And then I go into October again with all the work behind me, all the work done, and knowing that as soon as I come back from the fall trip, all I have to do is throw together the videos, pick the pictures I like, take time getting to know them. I can enjoy the holidays. I could do, just the normal stuff that time of year and have very little stress leading into when I head off to Death Valley. But in order to do this, in order to make this transition, I need to have a lot of work from this fall's trip so that I can basically split it in half and say the first half is going to go toward the end of this year. And then I'm going to start off next year's folio basically with the second half of the Zion work. So that's the reason why I was working extra hard and shooting more film than usual, because I need to go through all that effort in order to do that transition. And based on the caliber of work that I have so far, and as I'm going through and scanning them, I definitely have that.
Good. Nice.
So I think it just speaks to looking at the things that we do, trying to find ways of streamlining the process and figuring out, how to do things in a way that is more sustainable in the long term, without, working oneself into the ground.
Yeah. That's something that I'm trying to figure out too, as well, when it comes to my writing, and especially with this job. Like, the past week and a half, essentially since getting back to Acadia, has been almost nonstop for me, and I'm not used to it.
Yeah.
Because I'm working to collect all of the articles that I need for the magazine. I'm making sure that I have the 2 monographs that I'm going to be reviewing, and starting to review those, take the photos that I need, everything for that. Drafting interview questions, which has been a bear, but I finally got those done. And then on top of that, trying to figure out my writing stuff, like for sending out to various publications or whatever of my own, and the job. So
yeah,
talk about needing to streamline the process. Oh, and not to mention, also in the midst of all of this, I changed up my gym routine so that I'm going 4 times a week instead of just 3. So
yeah, how have you found the balance so far between working your day job now with the magazine stuff and the personal work? Has it made you any more or less productive for the magazine and the personal work at all?
If you ask David Kingham, yes. If you ask me, no. It's fun.
So it's one of the things where it seems like from the outside, perhaps.
It's funny because I sent over, let me pull up that text from him. Where'd it go? That was just this morning. Where the hell is it? Okay, yeah. So I told him, or I sent him over what was supposed to go out in October, but it was cutting it so close that we're pushing it out on Monday instead, and I'll just write twice for Dodge and Burn Digest for November. I sent him over the article for that. I got done the interview questions for the 2 photographers we're interviewing for the magazine, as well as continuing up with the contacting people for the articles and doing all of my usual stuff. And he said, you seem to be reinvigorated and kicking ass this month, so it must be doing you some good regarding my job and everything. And I'm like, I'm not sure what you're seeing, but I'm not seeing that, because everything this month seems to have been right at the very edge, right up, working up until the 12th hour, and then overtime some. So I'm trying to find that balance. I found it with the gym. I wake up around, as long as I'm up and out of bed by 6 o'clock or so in the morning, I'm good. I can hit the gym for 2 hours or whatever it is, come back, and I still have time in the morning before I start to meet with clients and do my day job work. So I found that balance, which is great. I just need to start to find that balance for my writing and implement more of a habitual process with that. I'm doing some of the other things that I want to do to help streamline that, which I'm hoping to find through this month, November. And just stay on top of things, because I want to start pushing that a lot more, especially now that I have one article that I have to finish up tonight, this weekend, to send over for a new publication that I want to write for, and hopefully get it approved, and then that'll be out at some point. And obviously, at that point, I'll have a link. But
yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, obviously, it probably feels like you're just treading water, trying to get all the stuff done. But I would not be surprised if that, forces whatever sort of change to allow you to, I don't know, reinvent things a little bit, kind of like what I'm trying to do with my stuff, be more efficient with stuff, but ultimately end up in some, allow you to do the work that you need to do at the level that you want to do it at, just by forcing that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, there are going to be a lot of shifts happening that are forced because of this job.
Yeah.
Shifts that I may not have been anticipating in the past, but that are necessary and hopefully will be good in the long run. A lot of things on my mind that have been on my mind for a while, even previous to this, but keep popping up that I need to deal with, write it out, talk to some people, figure it out. Which, speaking of talking to some people, for those who are curious to know more about my mental health journey, absolutely hate that word. Hate that phrasing.
It's overused.
Yeah. Anyway, I finally started seeing a therapist again, which is great.
Oh, good.
So if you recall, I was seeing a therapist around this time last year, for a couple months. And that was the first time at that point, over a decade, that I had been seeing a therapist, because of poor prior experience with poor first experience prior. See if I can get my words right and not twist my tongue. So I had talked to my primary care physician, my PCP, back in May, somewhere around that. And I was like, hey, I want to start seeing a therapist again through the hospital where my insurance was accepted. And she was like, all right, yeah, we'll throw in a referral and everything. And then I didn't hear anything. I put in that referral. I was supposed to get a intake call for them to go over some questions, everything, make sure that this was the right path, or not that I needed something else or whatever.
Yeah.
Essentially to get me in their system and to schedule a first appointment. And I didn't hear anything. And then June, July came around, and I messaged her again. I'm like, hey, still haven't heard anything. I feel as though I need this. This would be really beneficial. Is there anything else that I could do? And because of how my insurance is set up, the insurance is through the hospital for the hospital specifically. So I have to stay in network. And she was like, I'll put in the referral again, but there's nothing that I can do, which I'm like, yeah, okay, sure.
We have such a great system here.
I know. Yeah. Tell me about it. Still, then didn't hear anything with a second referral. Didn't hear anything from intake. No phone calls, no emails, nothing. And then I get this job, and beginning of October, I think it was before Acadia, or after, regardless, I called directly to the psychiatric sector of the hospital. And I was like, hey, I'm an employee here. I have a referral in. What's going on? I need therapy. This is something that I feel I need. And they were like, oh, well, we'll expedite it since you're an employee, which is essentially what it came down to. And the next day I get a phone call from intake, and then I had my appointment yesterday, which is the 31st, Halloween. I'm like, 6 months of waiting for that?
Yeah.
Come on. And now I have everything set up. This month is a little weird, every other week, but after this month, until February, I'm scheduled every single week, same time, same day.
Is it in person or like a Zoom thing?
It's virtual. Yeah, so like a Zoom thing.
Okay.
Yeah. With my schedule, how it is and how messed up and changes every day, there's no way I could do in person. But yeah, I'm like, really? Like, this is what everything has come to? Like, I won't get much more into it, but regardless, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be in therapy again, and I'm hoping that I like the therapist so far from the hour or so that we spent talking. So time to, dive into all of my problems and try to fix at least one of them, maybe eventually.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. Especially with, I think, all the life changes you've been having lately,
absolutely.
with everything else kind of in turmoil, if there's some like strategies you can get or whatever it is that they can do. But it just sucks that there's the system is so poor that you have to advocate for yourself to such a degree that, for the people that, don't really have the ability to advocate for themselves, and perhaps the issues are so intense that they don't really have, that's not within their means, they're not going to be getting the help that they need.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a extremely broken system. But it's good that you finally were able to, advocate for yourself to get that pushed through. But it sucks that it takes that much effort to do that.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And it's just really unfortunate how nasty everything is in the mental health world, like dealing with certain clients and just seeing how truly broken this system is and how unfortunate it is. And the fact that like you'll have people that like, it comes down to these people commit crimes or they kill someone or they kill themselves. And then the system looks back and says, what did we do wrong? Where did this come from? How did this happen?
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, maybe if you would have helped this kid out a year ago, 5 years ago, then this wouldn't have happened, But we always point blame at various other things first. But yeah. So anyway.
So it is time for the artist of the week. So
yes.
So who do we have this week?
Well, I was thinking of highlighting someone, but the more that I think about it, we're going to hold off on his work for now. Not for any other reason than my inability to decide. I spent like an hour, when was I think yesterday morning, figuring out what glasses I wanted to buy. Because I haven't bought new glasses in like a decade. And so I finally went over and I was going to buy them online because you can get them off the website for relatively cheap and they're fine.
Yeah.
But I also don't like that because I know how different focal lengths distort your face and it's not truly accurate how they're going to look in person versus in a photo when it's like that.
Yeah.
Benefits of being a photographer, I guess. So I finally went over to this eye doctor, this place, and like I said, I spent maybe an hour just try this frame on. That's all right. Try this frame on. This one looks the same, but it's different. Try this one on. It just
too many choices.
I finally just picked one that I was like, they're not too dissimilar to what I have now. And I'm like, these are good. And the guy's like, you good? He's like, I think so. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, dude, I'm going to be here all day long, right alongside of you, not getting paid to look at glasses. But anyway, all right. Since I have been obsessing over his work, he's actually someone that that I have interviewed for the magazine. David Ward Photography. If you are on Instagram, it is at David Ward Photos, and Ward is W-A-R-D.
Looking it up now. All right. Oh yeah, he's got some great work.
So he has been majorly inspiring me for the past few months, but especially in my trip to Acadia. I'm sure after this, when I eventually do release some of those images, you'll be able to connect some of the dots and see where that inspiration came from. But how did I found his work through On Landscape. He's written for them in the past, and I think it was that he had written 2 articles shortly after the pandemic in like 2021 about acquisition versus inquisition in photography, a 2-part series that's brilliantly written, really fascinating. And that's kind of like what sparked it. And then I forgot about it for a while and then went back to him because I had him saved as bookmarks. So David is probably one of the better known photographers in the UK, photographing a lot in the Lake District in Cornwall. But he kind of photographs all over the world and does a lot of, for the past 20 years, he's been doing a lot of teaching of workshops. He started off with large format, specifically in editorial and advertising photography, photographing cars and products and various non-landscape type things.
Yeah.
And then he ended up transitioning over to landscape photography. And it's interesting that he calls himself a landscape photographer in the sense that in the same way that I find it interesting that Chuck Kimmerly calls himself a landscape photographer, or even that I do, because these subjects that he photographs aren't all natural. They're not all...
There's a lot of man-made stuff,
yes.
But I see that it's photographed in the style of a person working with small scenes for nature photography with a lot of attention to light and pattern and detail. And at first glance, you look at it and it looks like a natural subject, but then you realize it's a man-made subject, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. I just, looking through his work, I absolutely love just how he points out these very small details. If you just go into, any of his galleries, but go into like his latest images galleries on his website, and like you look at rust imitating life, and just this, it's very obviously just, it's tangled metal that's rusted over, but it almost resembles like leaves, fall leaves from a tree.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. It looks like a old like ferns or something like that are dead and decaying.
He has one photograph that's absolutely phenomenal. I have to see if I can find it, so you'll have to give me a minute here.
He's got there's some black and white work in there as well, which is mixed in with the color, which works well mixed in with the color.
He's also, so I mentioned that he was using large format for a while, and then he switched over to digital, and now he's using I think it's a Sony A7R4, I believe. Sony system regardless, and a tilt shift adapter for using manual focus Zeiss lenses.
I can see how that would be very beneficial and could play into the look for some of the images. And you could tell that he has that background as a large format photographer, just the way that he's framing things and the way that things are set up and the eye for stuff.
Absolutely. And that's really why I looked at because I talked before about not being certain with working with digital, whether I would be okay with just focus stacking or if I should get like a Cambo Actus system or something of that sort. And I look at the work that he's creating, which is very in line with the kind of work that I create or at least desire to create. And I just think I could do that. If he could do this with a tilt shift lens, there's little reason as to why I can't as well. Why I can't make that same system work. And
I think also by working with the tilt shift lenses, you have the ability to do some stuff in camera that it simplifies the process compared to, the focus stacking and all that. But also just as with working with a large format, and this is something I've talked about in the past where there's certain things that I just know I will not be able to get in focus just because of, physics. So I just get the most important stuff, and it allows me to be far more accepting of the stuff that is imperfect and actually embracing that to some degree. So I can see that working with digital, but with the tilt shift setup may allow a person to say, hey, this is the best that I could do. This is, I'm not going to spend hours and hours trying to make this absolutely perfect. I'm going to make it as good as it can be, and accept everything else. And I think that might probably be the key to being more satisfied with one's work. So I could definitely see that being a good approach. And it is easier to some degree than, trying to perfect things after the fact.
And that's something that I've struggled with a little bit now working with digital is, like I said earlier, not having tilt and being able to get everything sharp like I wanted to, unless I focus stack. And then of course with focus stacking, you have to worry about movement and wind and all of that.
Yeah.
So it becomes it's one of those questions of, like you said, what's most important in this frame, and get that in focus and let the rest play out as it does, which could be a good thing or a bad thing in terms of how it actually represents once it's printed or once it's on the screen, on a bigger screen, if it's distracting for that blurred out section.
Well, you figure it's got to make for a much more peaceful experience in the field when, everything, at least from my experience, when in the field, things can feel very chaotic, trying to find just the right time when the light's good. And you feel like you're juggling all these different things. But then if one was to try to do like a focus stack at the same time, you're concentrating on that technical side of things, and it's just so much more to juggle versus here's one photo with the plane of focus where I want it to be. Click, cool, I'm done. I'm going to wander and find something else now. So it just seems like it'd be a much more almost like therapeutic experience in the field.
I've kind of found the opposite.
the mania.
I've kind of found the opposite.
How so?
When it comes to focus stacking, like, I don't know if it's like the auditory, like almost white noise that's created when you are twisting the barrel of the lens, take a photo, twist the barrel of the lens, take a photo. It's like, I don't know. I find that to be at least somewhat relaxing at times. It can be very frustrating when it's not working out. But when it does, and I know that it's going to work just fine, then it can be very relaxing. But all of that said, I did find that photograph finally. I don't know why I can't find it on his website, because it's truly brilliant. I included it in the chat. Might have to copy and paste that link. It's links to On Landscape magazine. And I'll include this link for those listening in the show notes. If you haven't tuned us out already.
Oh yeah, that's a cool shot.
So
it looks like a piece of ice that's acting like a lens, but submerged in water.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
I absolutely love that photograph. And it's just, that was shot with a tilt shift lens. That's when he was first trying to figure out the transitory process between large format and digital.
Yeah.
But
that's the sort of subject that's, very well suited for that, especially if one's trying to get like a certain shutter speed or something like that, rather than trying to focus stack. And I think with the focus stack, I can totally see what you're saying in terms of, it becomes a process in itself. But I think because I had played with that a while back. For me, it was the uncertainty of not knowing if I got it or not, or how it would turn out. I think that's the part that would, like if, for example, for the photo that you sent over with the ice that's submerged in water and the rocks and which people will have to check out in the show notes. But like something like that, if one was trying to focus stack something like that, you'd probably walk away from that being like, I have no clue. I have no clue if this is going to work out or not.
Yeah, but Ben, you have that with large format. You have that you have that same uncertainty with large format. If you tried to get a photograph like this with large format, you'd have no idea. So where's the difference?
I think that I would though. Like, I think if you work with it long enough, you like with large, like for example, the images from my recent trip, when I get the film back, there's generally no surprise. Things generally turn out pretty much like I think that they will. And I think that would be the case for a scene like this. But, I guess if they just focus stack all the time, then they have that same degree of, knowing what to expect. I think if anything, it's just about knowing the limits of what the sort of subject you're working with, the sort of, camera stuff you're working with, and then working within those limits. Yeah. I think that's probably probably mostly what it comes down to. But it just reduces variables, or at least it changes the way that those variables are displayed.
Right.
But yeah, that is a beautiful photo. And also the little bit of either sunrise or sunset light gleaming off the top of the ice.
It's so good.
It gives a little bit of a taste of what the larger scene is by looking at a smaller scene, which is one of the things I really love about small scenes, where it hints at what lies beyond, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, cool. I say we wrap it up there.
I think so too.
I've got my neighbor waiting downstairs for me to show me some work stuff. So.
I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.